I have always been a reader. Like, my nickname as a child was Bookworm. An entire wall of my childhood bedroom was covered in bookshelves and books. There is a photo of me somewhere at 8 years old, hidden away in the corner at my aunt and uncle's wedding, reading a book. Like, reading has always been a part of my identity. It's always been a part of who I am. But I never remember it being as cool as it is now. In fact, it was always something shameful whilst I was growing up. It was something that made me a little bit odd, a bit different from my peers. But now, reading is cool. Everywhere you look, people are reading again. Book sales are rising, libraries are buzzing, and BookTok is taking over social media. But why is that? What is it that's finally making people swap their doom scrolling for books? I want to explore why reading is making such a comeback and how it seems to have become some form of escape from the digital world. And the book sales data from the last few years does seem to support this. In what is a desperate, shameless bid for engagement on this video, I'm going to ask you right now, if you're watching this, to comment what book you're currently reading down below. Do it. Do it for me. Please, engage. According to lovereading.co.uk, the mid-2000s were the heyday of reading, annual sales often exceeding 210 million books in the UK alone. And then what happened in the 2010s? Smartphones happened, little tiny screens in our pockets, which slowly but surely became all of our entertainment lifelines. I mean, who needs books when you have access to the entire world in your pocket? Nielsen Books reported a 6.1% drop in book sales in 2010 alone, a trend which the USA followed at 5.7%. Fiction was the category most in decline, closely followed by children's books. But as of 2020, book sales are on the up again. In 2024, Nielsen's total consumer market recorded over £1.82 billion in book sales, and unbelievably, that was a 0.6% dip from 2023, the year that holds the all-time consumer market record. 2020, 2021, 2022 all held very similar data. The pandemic clearly led to a boom in people buying books, but now in 2025 the lockdowns are well and truly over. Life for many is just back to business, and books continue to fly off the shelves. In a bit of a flip from the 2010 data, in 2024, fiction specifically achieved its highest sales since records began, surpassing the previous record by £50 million, and children's books were very close behind. Fantasy in particular had its biggest increase in sales in the adult section, which I don't think will come as a surprise to anyone, because you cannot go 5 steps without somebody raving about the latest romantasy book. But my thesis statement of this video is why? What's making people swap endless scrolling for books? We are going to explore why reading is making such a comeback and how it's become a form of escapism from the digital world. However, before I get into talking about the topic at hand, I just want to talk about a kind of half sponsorship that I have, an affiliate link that I have. I'm not at a point on this channel yet where I'm getting loads of sponsors, but I do have myself an affiliate link for BookBeat, and if I can get some of you to sign up to the free 60-day trial, then that's basically like a sponsorship for me. So if you want to do that, then feel free. BookBeat is one of the largest streaming services for audio and ebooks, with more than 900,000 books available across all genres. I've been really leaning towards using BookBeat recently. You basically pay for hours of listening rather than paying for individual books, which basically means that you get more book for your buck. I'm sure you all know at this point how much I love audiobooks. I listen to so many of them. I love an audio memoir or a non-fiction book. They just feel like very long podcasts to me, and I love it. It's a free 60-day trial. You can use my code Georgia Marie or use the link in the top line of the description. That'll give you 20 hours of free listening per month for the next 2 months. And it depends what books you choose to listen to, but most books I listen to tend to sit around the 7 or 8 hour mark. So that's essentially 5 free audiobooks. It's a free trial for 60 days. I give you free audiobooks and you help me out to say thank you for making such fun and entertaining content. Please, I'm not above begging. I will beg you, please, use my affiliate code and try out BookBeat, please. Okay, and with that, the content. Part 1. digital burnout. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to any of us that recent studies seem to show a very concerning trend. As screen time increases, our attention spans are diminishing. Things like social media fatigue, doom scrolling, and algorithm-driven anxiety are becoming much more prevalent. I know that I personally get very affected by my social media feeds. I deleted Twitter, or X, but I refuse to call it that, because I simply couldn't handle the content I was seeing on there. It was either very concerning far-right ideology seeping into my very leftist feed, which is why that is an entirely other topic, or it's people on the left screaming about how the world is descending into chaos, all the awful things that we likely have coming up for us in our future, all of the awful things that are currently happening in the world, which I'm not dismissing as untrue, but it's very heavy to read about all day, every day. I couldn't hack it. It was consistently bringing me down. So Twitter, gone, and I immediately noticed that I had much more time for my other hobbies, such as reading. God, imagine the power I could have over my mind if I could delete TikTok. Imagine. One step at a time. I went on a bit of a tangent there. We're like 2 minutes into this video. I'm already tangenting, but screen time. One study published in PubMed called The Association Between Screen Time and Attention in Children, a systematic review, found that increased screen time is associated with diminished attention spans in children, which isn't going to be a surprise to any of us. It suggests the need for parental and educational intervention to manage screen exposure, which, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that does seem like the bare minimum when it comes to parenting. But adults are also not immune to these effects. I listened to a podcast / read the transcript of a podcast by the American Psychological Association called Speaking of Psychology, featuring Dr. Gloria Mark. She is a psychologist and professor of informatics at the University of California, Irvine. So basically, she studies how people interact with technology in their everyday lives and how that affects us, namely affects our attention and our moods. And she has noted how in the past 2 decades, attention spans overall have measurably decreased, correlating this decline with the pervasive use of digital devices and social media. This is a real thing, and I'm sure a lot of our own personal experiences could back up on her research. I know my attention span is not what it used to be. I'm trying to get it back. And this all, of course, has a larger impact on our mental health. Doom scrolling, which is the compulsive consumption of negative news online, this inability to stop scrolling, to stop consuming, has been linked to increased anxiety and depression. A study published in Technology, Mind and Behaviour introduced something called the doom scrolling scale to measure this behaviour and how it correlates to psychological impact. It found that individuals who doom scroll exhibit higher levels of neuroticism and more prone to social media addiction and FOMO, which in this context is the fear of missing out on something as it happens live online. And this all collectively contributes to increased psychological distress, elevated anxiety, and depressive symptoms. Doom scrolling is characterised by this compulsive drive to seek out negative information, creating this negative feedback loop in your brain. You consume distressing news, your mood worsens, and it leads you to seek out even more depressing news, and so on. And this can affect all different areas of your life. It can cause intense anxiety and overstimulate the brain, leading to sleep disturbances. And excessive exposure to negative news can also elevate your stress hormone levels, cortisol and adrenaline, resulting in increased mental fatigue on top of that physical fatigue. Further research also linked doom scrolling to existential anxiety. It gives you very pessimistic views on humanity and on your future. Basically, doom scrolling equals very bad for your brain. We cannot underestimate the profound impact that constantly consuming negative content can have on every aspect of your life. And it's not all about the doom scrolling. Digital platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube even, but don't click off this please, are meticulously designed to capture and retain our attention through continuous notifications, endless scrolling, and algorithmically curated content. Your entire social media feeds, especially on TikTok, are perfectly curated to keep your attention. The algorithm pays attention to what you're liking, what you're interacting with, what you're watching for longer, and it feeds you more of that same content. So the longer you're scrolling, the more money the platform is making. They need to keep you hooked. impact. And on the other side of the coin, us creators are also making money the longer we can keep you hooked. It's in my best interest as a creator to keep you watching and interacting with my content. Is it me? Am I the drama? Probably.
Is it me? Am I the drama? I don't think I'm the drama. Maybe I am. Am I the villain? I don't think I'm the villain.
But speaking as a creator, speaking as part of the problem, it's not just the fact that it's my livelihood that keeps me posting online. It's the fact that each and every interaction, every like, every comment triggers the release of dopamine in my brain, a neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and reward. It creates this cycle of constantly needing to seek these very brief moments of validation. It's very addictive. This is for the regular person just posting things on social media for their friends, and it's for the content creators. We're all just out here seeking those little tiny dopamine hits. But once again, that leads to mental fatigue and can reduce our attention span. I know I've personally felt all of these effects of social media, and I have no doubt that so many of you have as well. So what do I find myself turning to when social media or the internet generally just feels like too much? I pick up a book, I read, and it turns out I'm not the only one. In contrast to the effect that social media can have on our brains, reading a book demands sustained attention and immersion. You've got to be deeply engaged when you're reading a book. You can't have a short attention span. Digital reading, and by that I mean like reading things on your phone online, encourages skimming. It's how much you can read in a short amount of time and click on the next thing. It's all about engagement. But reading an actual book, whether that's a physical copy or on a Kindle or other e-reader, requires a much deeper connection with the material. You have to immerse yourself to get the most out of it. There are studies out there that show reading a book enhances comprehension skills, critical thinking, and fascinatingly, empathy. It makes sense. You're introducing yourself to worlds and ideas that are likely outside of your day-to-day experience. While social media algorithms keep showing you the things you're already interested in, books widen your worldview. Sure, you might have your favourite genre, you might always go for the same kinds of books, but they're all going to have slightly different ideas, slightly different characters, and they're going to introduce you to new world experiences, and that increases empathy. And with people getting fatigued with social media, which you could argue reduces empathy, they're now turning to books. But this is where we come into a bit of a paradox with the rise of BookTok. Because one of the main things pushing younger people particularly towards reading just so happens to be social media, BookTok in particular. BookTok is TikTok's reading community, a niche in the algorithm where people talk about books, sharing reviews, recommendations, and all sorts of very interesting creative content centered around books. Bookstagram and booktube also lend a hand towards this, but BookTok is undeniably where you're going to find the most traction here, like the most engaged communities around reading and books. One study from Words Rare found that the average American BookTok user's reading activity had increased by around 60% due to their exposure to BookTok. And I do want to make it clear that that's not the average American in general, that is the average American who is familiar with and on the BookTok algorithm, but still, that's a lot of people. That's a very impressive statistic. If you are exposed to content around reading, you are 60% more likely to read. Kind of, in a nutshell. And I don't think I can talk about the rise of BookTok without talking about the huge part that the COVID-19 pandemic played in this. The lockdowns in 2020 led to people stuck at home looking for new forms of entertainment and, importantly, community. And the first place people turned for this was social media. TikTok as a whole exploded in popularity in this time, but niche communities, especially like BookTok, flourished. People finally had time to comment, to make their own content, to actually finally take up the recommendations that they've been hearing over and over again. People were on TikTok posting these authentic reader reactions. They were crying, gasping, jumping for joy over books. It was a really good emotional outlet. And I think people turned to reading and books in particular in this time because it was a way to escape reality in these scary and very unprecedented times. And then you could finish that book and go online and talk about it and continue that experience. You could escape and connect at the same time. The lockdowns were really scary for a lot of people, and social media was the only means of connection for so many trapped in their homes. So you had reading to escape and social media, BookTok, to connect. It gave everything. In this time in particular, people were seeking comforting and very immersive stories. They were looking for worlds outside of their own, and I do think that's why genres like fantasy, romance, and dystopian fiction really boomed. People didn't want to be reading about this world, about the traumas of the earth and everyday life. They wanted to remove themselves from it entirely. It didn't matter if the writing was good, it mattered that it took them away from this reality. Romantasy, which is romance and fantasy, became one of BookTok's defining trends as a result. Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses blew up in this time. It is not a good book. I won't bore you with my review, but I will link it down below if you want to see it. But I can see why people clung on to this so much. It takes you into a world entirely different from our own. Feyre, the main character, is a human living in a world where she is struggling. She is living in intense poverty before a mythical creature picks her up and takes her away. Sure, it was meant to be as a punishment, but Feyre then finds herself in a magical world where she is completely spoiled for the most part. Her worries are taken away. And that's what people wanted in this time. Young people being sent home from school or university, not allowed to see their friends, jumped on this trend of reading. And it seems like it's something that even 5 years later hasn't really left. Because I do believe that once you realise that reading is fun, once you remove the school from it, you do have a hobby for life. Once a reader, always a reader. I stand by that. But as I said, it's been 5 years now, and BookTok doesn't seem to be going anywhere. In fact, I made my very own BookTok account just last week, if you want to go and follow it. Yes, this is shameless promotion. It's Georgia Reads. I make sapphic BookTok books. And the power of BookTok cannot be understated. Like, this trend reshaped the entire publishing industry. Authors and publishers started to leverage the platforms for their own marketing, leading to increased visibility and increased sales. All it takes is one viral video and a book that perhaps no one had ever heard of before would begin to fly off the shelves. The smartest of the marketing teams would send copies of their books to relevant creators, and regardless of if that book is good or not, if you see something spoken about multiple times, spoken about in multiple videos, next time you walk into a bookshop and you see that book on the shelves, you're more likely to pick it up. You're not just going to gloss over it. TikTok is an incredibly powerful platform for creators, authors, publishers alike. I mean, a prime example is Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles, which was released in 2011. Now, I read almost exclusively queer books. I have done since the early 2010s, and this is not a book I had heard about. It is not something I had read myself. Like I said, I read only queer books, and I hadn't heard of it. That is until the BookTok boom, the pandemic, and suddenly everyone is talking about The Song of Achilles. I wish I could trace this back to the very first BookToker that spoke about this book on this platform and give them a little kiss on the head to say thank you, because that is a book that, in my opinion, is worth every single ounce of praise it gets. It took almost a whole decade and a social media platform that didn't even exist in 2011 when this book was released to finally make people pay attention. But then, on the other hand, we also have BookTok to thank for the Colleen Hoover craze. It Ends With Us was originally released in 2016, but once again, it didn't go viral until the BookTok hype hit. Colleen Hoover's books aren't good. The stories aren't good, but they're very easy reading with simple language, and they follow a predictable formula. They provided comfort and predictability in a time when everything was unpredictable. And so Colleen Hoover, she blew up. And I suppose that's the double-edged sword of BookTok, isn't it? Like, it has this power to unearth and amplify genuinely beautiful, transformative literature like The Song of Achilles, but it also rewards books that are, for lack of a better word, just fine. Books that don't necessarily challenge or inspire, but offer instead a kind of mindless escapism, just quick dopamine hits disguised as literature. And that's not to say there's no place for books like Hoover's. People clearly found solace in her stories, in their reliability, in the way they didn't demand too much from a brain already exhausted by a world in chaos. And that is valid. But also, they're not good books, and the way they're spoken about on BookTok makes people think they are very good books. But all of this also makes me wonder, if BookTok had existed a decade earlier, what other incredible books might have been given their moment? What books might have found an audience they deserved instead of just languishing away in relative obscurity? What books have we missed out on because there wasn't BookTok to give them hype? Tell you what, that could be another opportunity for you in the comments to tell me, what books do you think deserve much more hype than they get? Like, which books should be massive on BookTok? Maybe I'll make my own BookTok video about them. Maybe. So, overall, is social media helping or hurting reading culture? Well, of course, there is no easy answer. BookTok and other online reading communities have undoubtedly boosted reading popularity. They've created these massive, engaged communities of readers. I mean, like we just spoke about, viral recommendations have revived older books and helped debut authors gain traction as well. BookTok alone has been credited with driving billions in book sales. Independent bookstores and small publishers have benefited from this. Social media also helps amplify diverse voices more than mainstream media, helping books by BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and disabled authors reach a much wider audience. Now, when I'm looking for a new book recommendation, I don't go on Goodreads, I don't go on Amazon, I go to TikTok. I search up sapphic new releases and I go to town. I hear first-hand reviews from readers. I'm going to focus on LGBTQ+ books now because that is very much my wheelhouse, it is where my expertise lies. But there are more queer books being released now than ever before. In recent history, publishers would turn away queer authors, saying that their stories just didn't have mainstream sellable appeal. But now you just have to type in 2 words to the TikTok search bar and you will see the sheer amount of people desperate for queer book recommendations. You can see how popular these books actually are. I mean, I started my sapphic BookTok account literally a week ago, like 9 days ago, and I've already got over 1,500 followers, so the hunger is definitely there. All of this is proof to mainstream publishers that people want to see these kinds of books, and it also bolsters queer authors to self-publish if publishing companies aren't interested. BookTok shows the communities are there, they are interested. And so you've got to ask yourself at a certain point, are mainstream publishers just not publishing them because of homophobia? Because they don't want to, not because the interest isn't there. It very much is there. Social media also creates community, and do not underestimate the power of community. It makes reading a shared experience. Reading is no longer an isolated hobby, something somebody does on their own in silence. It's now shared, it's spoken about. People have started and attended book clubs for as long as books have existed, maybe. I'm just saying that. For a long time. And now book clubs talking about books is so much more accessible. So that's all the positive when it comes to social media and books. What about the negative? How might social media be hurting reading culture instead of helping? As we've already covered, social media promotes the quick, digestible style content. Many users now prefer summaries and aesthetic overviews of books instead of actually reading the full novels. So many people now want books that read like TikToks, fast-paced, cliffhangers, short chapters, snappy, easy prose. Many authors feel pressurized to write these BookTok-friendly stories. Gone are the days of literary fiction. It's now all about easy consumption. Okay, maybe I'm being dramatic. The days of literary fiction are gone. But I'm making a point. That point being that marketability to a BookTok crowd becomes more important than literary depth. Also, I have no doubt that a lot of people out there are inspired by BookTok to read and buy books that just don't match their tastes, just because they're trending. Yes, I have fallen victim to this. I'm looking at you, romantasy. I mean, I did read romantasy for a video. But still, I was inspired by BookTok. And then there is also, of course, the overconsumption of it all, the whole trend of people buying books and not actually reading them. I have seen countless TikToks and YouTube videos of people talking about showing off their 200 book long physical TBR list, 200 books that they've bought, spent money on, and just do not have the time to read. It's aesthetic, it looks good for them to have these 200 books on their bookshelves that realistically they're never going to read. Do they even want to read them? It's just about overconsumption. It's just about at a point showing off. And the worst thing is, these videos always do so well. Consumerism, the content, the aesthetic bookshelves all become more important than actually reading the books. BookTok and social media convinces people to spend more money than they have just because it looks good, because it looks cool, maybe? I don't know. I could go on all day. There are pros and cons of everything, BookTok/book social media being no exception. But let's move on to the next point, to part 3, the desire for slow, deep thinking. In a world dominated by this fast, bite-sized content, people are undeniably beginning to crave a return to slower, more immersive experiences. In general, people are beginning to crave long-form content over short-form, and being a content creator, I can attest to this. YouTube videos over an hour long perform exponentially better than 20-minute videos. My podcast is performing better than ever before. Deep dive essays are crazy popular right now. There's seemingly this collective fatigue with digital noise. People want to learn, they want to immerse themselves in their content, and it's hard to immerse yourself when it's over in 60 seconds. The internet has conditioned us for years to consume information in fragments, in tweets, short-form videos, snappy Instagram captions, just quick news bites. But now the opposite seems to be coming true, and this is very typical for the internet. Everything does tend to happen in cycles. Perhaps it could be argued maybe that attention spans aren't actually shrinking, they're just maybe being used differently now. But books do fit into this cultural shift alongside the now 2 to 3 hour long podcast and the deep dive video essays. I watched a 6 hour long video essay the other day whilst I was working. 6 hours. I watched it all. And all of this does demand focus and time. It rewards the consumer with deeper understanding and deeper education. I also feel like after years of very face value news bites, just headlines without context, sound bites without nuance, viral tweets that reduce these incredibly complex issues to just 280 characters, that as the world becomes more politically unstable, more economically volatile and socially divided, people are beginning to push back against this very shallow information. Instead of just skimming the surface now, people want to understand the deeper mechanics of how the world works, and that could also be fueling this shift into books. For a long time now, people have just passively absorbed whatever content is put in front of them, but with media literacy on the rise and such an unstable world, surface level is just no longer enough. It's feeding this desire for more. Now obviously all of this is very layered, and this isn't the only reason that people are turning to books, but I'd hazard a guess that it is lending a hand. People just want more than surface level information, and this is being reflected in everything across the internet and in books. And then there's also the mental health benefits of reading as well. Reading is proven to slow down the mind. It forces the brain to focus on one thing at a time. Reading engages the imagination, and when you're really deep into a book, it does create something akin to a meditative state. It's very mindful. Escapism is very healing. Books offer an alternative reality. Books help process emotions, whether that's through just relatable characters or profound insights. They can provide emotional catharsis. I'm sure all of us readers have found that one book that somehow manages to grab our hearts in its little hands, the book that just sees you. The most recent book for me like that was Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. I felt like in writing that book, Coco Mellors was writing about my life, about my experience, about my sisters. She wasn't, but I laughed and I cried like she was. And I understood myself much better after reading that book. I understood my oldest sister ways. And I understood both my sisters better as well, being the middle child, being the younger child. And that brings us back round to what I was saying earlier about empathy. Reading fiction specifically improves empathy by allowing readers to experience life through different perspectives. And that is something I wholly agree with. People who read books are more open to understanding others from different walks of life. I say it all the time, but I truly believe there is so much hatred in this world that can just be solved with better education, and books are a huge part of better education. I also feel like I need to talk about e-readers here, Kindles essentially, versus physical books, and I'm going to slide that in this part of the video because I wasn't really sure where else it best slotted in this script, lol. But you would think that in this digital world, people would be using Kindles and e-readers more than ever before. But in my research, I was kind of surprised to find out that that's not really the case. The best data I could find about all this came from tonabuzz.com. It was posted in November last year, so this is quite recent data. They write that the US market demonstrates a continued preference for print books, with 767.36 million units sold in 2023 in the US alone. And despite trends towards digitalization, a 2021 survey revealed that 68% of younger readers, so between the ages of 18 and 29, in the US prefer print books. What I mostly took from that is that at 30 years old, I no longer count as a younger reader. And that was like a knife in the back, I'm not going to lie to you. That was painful. But also 68% of people preferring print books. That's a big amount. But despite this, ebook sales are increasing with a 4% growth in September 2024 versus September 2023. And of course, Amazon's Kindle does dominate that market. 72% of e-readers are Kindles. That made me uncomfortable to read, especially with all the drama around Amazon removing ownership of books recently. But I am also a Kindle owner and I do live and die by my Kindle Unlimited. So once again, am I the drama? Trends seem to indicate that yes, I am the drama. But yeah, in general, people do clearly prefer classic print books. They outsell ebooks 4-1, and print book sales increased 13.2% between 2020 and 2021. It did start to drop off a little bit after this point, but that's on trend with the lockdowns coming to an end. People going back to work meant less time for activities like reading. Also, kind of besides the point, but still very relevant to this video, college graduates make up 90% of book readers, whilst only 61% of high school graduates read books. Those who dropped out of school have an even lower reading rate at just 32%. And economics also go hand in hand with reading. According to Tonabuzz again, 86% of individuals earning over $75,000 are readers, whilst only 62% of people earning less than $30,000 are readers. That is very interesting. But I return back to my original point there, e-readers versus physical books. Clearly people are craving a break from screens. Although Kindles are a more expensive outlay, ebooks are exponentially cheaper than physical books. It really wouldn't be surprising if people started leaning towards the e-readers. But instead, the opposite is true. In their downtime, people don't want to be looking at screens. They want the tangible experience of opening and reading a book. And I relate. I have my Kindle, I love my Kindle, but given the choice, I will go for a physical book every single time. My Kindle personally is reserved for ease whilst I'm travelling abroad. It's to take on public transport so I can just slip it in my bag. It's for reading at night when my wife is asleep and I don't want to disturb her with the light. I don't buy the books I really want to read on my Kindle. My Kindle is reserved for the silly little romances, the Kindle Unlimited, the books I don't crave having on my bookshelf. I would choose a physical book any day. The idea of curling up with a good book, getting all snug and cozy, is better with a physical book. In my mind anyway. I suppose it's a ritual of sorts, a kind of the ritual of reading a physical book. There is nothing I look forward to more than on a Sunday afternoon when the house is clean and my wife is on the sofa next to me gaming. I just want to snuggle up on the sofa with a blanket and a nice drink and a good book, a good physical book. It's always my favourite part of the week. I suppose, yeah, it could be argued that reading is a ritual. Part 4, what people are reading. I've already touched on this a little bit, but I do also want to explore what exactly people are reading during this rise. I think the current book trends do really reveal a lot about what people are craving, this escapism, emotional catharsis, and that deeper understanding that I keep harping on about apparently. Fantasy, especially romantasy and cozy fantasy and dark academia, seem to be the very dominating bestsellers currently because In my mind, it's all about escapism. In this very overwhelming real world, fantasy provides an alternative reality to sink into. Romantasy combines high-stakes adventure with romance. You get the thrills, the cliffhangers, and that emotional connection. Cozy fantasy is gentle, wholesome, low-stakes storytelling. It's a warm hug in book form. Dark academia taps into that longing for intellectual depth and mystery. It often critiques power and privilege, which are two things that the regular person is getting more and more disillusioned with. People in their reading aren't just looking for escape, they're looking for worlds that feel rich, immersive, and emotionally rewarding. But I also feel like I need to talk to you about the silly little romance books as well. The books with illustrated people on the covers and bold colours, the Emily Henrys, the Christina Laurens, the Abby Jimenezes of the book world. For years, romance novels were just dismissed as guilty pleasures. They were embarrassing, frivolous books for women only to read. But the current boom in contemporary romance proves how much people really need these stories. Unlike the fantasy and the dark academia, these books don't demand intense mental investment. They're just fun and breezy, they're easy to sink your teeth into, maybe the literary equivalent of comfort food. These stories provide predictability in the very best way. You know how it's going to end happy, and sometimes that's just what you need. A book doesn't always need to be serious to bring value or joy or comfort. And that's just as important as intellectual depth. And trends are also showing a massive return to classics right now. Young readers are turning to Austen, Orwell, and Dostoevsky. Readers, we are very multifaceted. This might also be a reaction to digital culture. These classics offer depth, complexity, and intellectual challenge, which, let's face it, isn't really something people are getting online. There's also a sense of timeless relevance in so many of these classic stories. Books like Orwell's 1984, Atwood's A Handmaid's Tale, Huxley's Brave New World all feel eerily relevant to today's modern world. You can learn something about today by reading the classics. You can learn what to avoid, how to fight, how to help. I also think the leaning towards dark academia has undoubtedly lent a hand to the revival of the classics as well. It makes this kind of literature very fashionable again. I think what we can tell from all these popular genres though is that people are looking for more than just entertainment in their books. They're looking for comfort, they're looking for escape, they're looking for knowledge, for help, all things which are very, very important. And this brings us on to what this means for the future. I think it's pretty undeniable that reading is back. It's cooler than ever, but what does that mean moving forward? Is this a fleeting thing, or is this a genuine culture shift? Like, is reading back for good? My camera battery just died as I was mid-flow. How rude. Anyway, you could argue that seeing as a huge surge of reading right now is thanks to BookTok, it will eventually fizzle out. But there are actually very strong indicators that this isn't just another passing fad. Many previous book booms, like the Harry Potter or the Twilight eras, they were driven by the fan bases behind the series. They were popular because of themselves. But today's surge in reading isn't down to a certain book or series, it's all platform driven. Social media is actively driving book sales, and it could be argued that as long as these platforms exist, books will remain a major part of the cultural conversation. And when these platforms no longer exist, the likelihood is that's because they've been replaced with the latest, newest thing, where the conversation around books will just continue. Gen Z and younger millennials, like myself, are rediscovering reading at a higher rate than any previous generation. Unlike older readers who maybe grew up on books and then drifted away, many younger people are discovering books now through social media first, meaning that reading is integrated into their digital lives. The two things coexist. Whilst trends in general might fluctuate, the cultural shift towards this deep engagement and thoughtful consumption suggests that reading isn't going anywhere anytime soon. If you want some numbers here, some real life data going back to that Toner Buzz article I referenced earlier, the revenue of the physical book market is expected to grow at an annual rate of 0.37% from 2024 to 2029, reaching $70.75 billion by 2029. Can you even fathom that amount of money? I can't, but that's where the book industry is going. And the market's revenue growth reflects its expected reach of 1.9 billion users by 2029. That's 1.9 billion people reading. And this isn't me just speculating and talking my thoughts loud at you. This is data, and I love data. The demand for books right now is stronger than ever, which is great for independent bookstores, many of which have built thriving communities on the back of this. However, Amazon still dominates the market, with its ability to sell books at massive discounts, meaning that indie stores are kind of fighting an uphill battle. I'm not here to preach at you, telling you to only buy at indie bookstores. I am a Kindle fiend after all. I know as well as anyone that it's not always viable to spend more money on a book that you can get cheaper on Amazon. Not everyone has that extra money to spend. Which prompts the question, is it better that people buy cheaper books on Amazon and actually read than not be able to afford them in indie bookstores and not read at all? That could be a whole other video. But this is me saying, if you are able to, supporting independent bookstores can make a massive difference. If you can spend the difference, choose independent rather than the big corporations. So, in conclusion, people are reading again as an escape, as a rebellion to digital burnout, as a way to find community online. To me, it seems like people are reading now with purpose. We live in a time now where everything is so loud all the time. Our phones, our news feeds, our expectations. We've got to work, commute, keep our homes clean, socialise, see our family. It's overwhelming. And books are the opposite of that. You need to be still, you need to look in. They're a time of silence, a time of depth. I'm realising as I say this aloud that I haven't even touched on audiobooks in this video, but I do have another video planned for a couple of weeks' time where I do talk about the whole do audiobooks count as reading debate, so maybe we can push that to there. I can't believe I didn't mention audiobooks at all really, apart from my BookBeat subscription. Sign up to BookBeat. Use my code Georgia Marie to get a free trial at BookBeat. That was unplanned. That worked. But yeah, maybe that is why people are reading again. Not because it's trendy or because an algorithm told them to, but just because they want to escape the noise for a little bit. I don't know. This entire episode has just been me talking my thoughts out loud. I may well be wrong. I'm not an expert by any means. I'm just a girl with eyes and ears and a need to overanalyze everything in life. So let me know what you think in the comments. Why are people reading again? That's my analysis. What is yours? Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you've watched all the way to the end, then thank you so much. If you're not subscribed, then what are you doing? Make sure you subscribe to this channel. I upload a new book video every single week, mostly about gay books, sometimes video essays, sometimes about books that are not gay, but mostly about gay books is kind of what I do here. But I do have lots of fun video essays planned, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.